this is the images of what's going on in traditional wastewater treatment systems. And here's a picture of what at the time was called solar aquatic wastewater treatment as the particular system on Cape Cod. I will say I have a particular sort of fondness for this technology. I did my master's degree at Yale University and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, studying what happens to nitrogen in these systems. So I actually also have a particular love for the nitrogen cycle. It's very, very cool stuff. But these are some of my colleagues at the Harwich Solar Aquatic Septage Treatment Plant. Septage is the gross stuff you pump out of the ground at people's houses. It's sort of the gnarliest of the gnarly wastewater. But I will say, you see they're kind of covered a little bit with shit. You do develop kind of like a different attitude towards human waste when you work in this plant. And I do want to mention at the outset that people who work in the wastewater treatment system have less absenteeism due to illness than people in almost any other industry. Why is that the case?
Probably building up a whole ton of immunity to...
They're constantly exposed. And there is a problem with, I mean, again, we're in a slightly different situation right now. We're trying to socially isolate, and that's the right thing to do. But there is a problem with our cultural bias towards, or some cultures' bias towards uber cleanliness and sort of isolating yourself from all microbes. We evolved in a sea of microbes. And in general, again, I'm not talking about our particular situation right now, having pretty continuous exposure to the microbes of the world builds your immune system. It's generally good for you. All right, so I will end on this slide before taking us on a tour. This is a toilet. This is the inside of the Living Machine, which is taking this water and cleaning it. And these are a bunch of Oberlin students, couple generations back, who are operators of the Living Machine and get paid to take care of this contraption. This is water flow through the system, and we are about to start here. This is a toilet. And then I'm going to walk you through the system and talk a little bit about what the different parts of this system do. But I want you to notice that this, at some level, is the model of everything we want to do with material, because it's a materially closed system. Water leaves the toilet, gets flushed, gets treated, goes through all this stuff, gets cleaned, and then goes back into the toilet. So we have two water systems in the Lewis Center. We have the gray water system, which is a completely closed loop recycling of water in the Living Machine. And then the drinking water you drink in here. Although the water in our toilets is probably cleaner than what most of the world is drinking, we don't drink that water. It's not EPA approved. And so all the water recycled in here is reused in toilets. Okay, with that said, what I'm going to try to do is figure out if I can get this darn camera working. Oh, okay, it looks like it already is working. Yes, you can see this. So for those of you who think that there are two John Petersons, there's fortunately for the world, only one of me. And I'm going to leave my my computer on, and I've got this big battery pack here, put in my pocket, and we're gonna wander. And this is gonna be, hold on, I gotta get this to actually switch to showing what I'm seeing. All right. Are you looking mostly at my screen, or are you looking mostly at my camera right now? Because I can't really tell.
Screen.
You're looking at my screen.
PowerPoint.
Even if like the screen is what's big on my computer, huh? What about now?
Now your face is big.
My face is big. Okay. Well, we'll make my face a little bit smaller. But this is going to be a lot more fun if you guys ask lots of questions. So here we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We are headed downstairs. All right, our first stop is going to be at where the drinking water comes into the building. So this big contraption here is the water meter for the building. And about 70% of the water in this building is recycled. It's reused within the, would normally flow through that meter. Okay, that's stop number one. We are now going into the semi-gendered bathroom here. You're seeing our urinals. But one thing you'll notice, what do you guys notice if you look at the water in that toilet? What do you notice?
It's not clear.
It's not clear, that's right. It's got a certain yellowish color to it. And that's because although the Living Machine is very good at taking nutrients out of water and eating up organic matter, it is not so good at taking out plant tannins. Oh, I'm gonna do this just for Diana. This shot is just for Diana. You like that, Diana? Okay, we got a clap there. She was worried about our lettuce. Here's our beautiful waterfall. Okay, those are side notes. All right. The combination. We are now entering the Living Machine, and I'll start in the entrance by showing you the lab. So this is some of the equipment we used to monitor the performance of these things. The one on the right is a pH conductivity temperature sensor, which is very important to measuring the acidity of the water, which tells us about what microbes are doing. The device on the left is a dissolved oxygen probe, which is very important for understanding the metabolic activity. And here is a data sheet that student operators fill out when they work on it. Normally you'd be safe in here and you'd wear gloves. Yeah. All right, so we're entering the Living Machine. I'm gonna walk fairly quickly through this section because we're gonna come back into here, but we're now inside the little greenhouse. But I wanna trace the flow of water through this system. And the flow does not start in here, it starts outside. So our journey is going to start outside. And this is the part where students get to make really, ugly groaning noises if you were here, if you were present here. So we've got a series of tanks out here. So let me just show you these. These are called the AN tanks. AN1 is this cover. This one here is AN2. This one here is called OA, I'm sorry, this is CA1, closed aerobic 1, closed aerobic 2, and then there's a pump station that stores water out here. And I'm gonna talk about what goes on in each of those tanks. But for the moment, here you can see, give you some idea of where you are. There's Talcott, there's Harkness, here's the Lewis Center, and here is AN1. See it labeled AN1. And I'm gonna pull the lid off here. When you flush the toilet in the Lewis Center, your poop goes straight into here. So if you look down in there, I'm expecting to hear some groaning noises. Can you give me some sort of groaning noises so I know you're actually there? Right. All right, thank you so much. You can actually, if we were here and this system was being actively used, you would see stuff flowing out of that little white thing you see in the corner up there in the right. But this is basically raw sewage in here. And just flows by gravity from the toilet into this tank. And it's not a mixed tank. It's not aerated. That tank, here, I'll flip back to my screen for a second. That tank behind me is one in which large organic molecules begin to break down into smaller organic particles. It's a pretty slow reaction because there's no oxygen provided to that tank. And so what occurs in there occurs in an anaerobic environment, an environment without oxygen. And anaerobic decomposition is very slow. It involves fermentation, so the production of alcohols in there. It involves methanogenesis, the production of methane. And the details of that aren't important, but one of the things I want to impress on you is that oftentimes I'll hear tour guides talking about the Living Machine as I go by, and they'll say something like, the Living Machine treats water without any chemicals. And it makes me want to grab my hair and pull it all out because this system is one big biogeochemical reactor. It's a biogeochemical reactor that's run on, the ecology of microbes, but everything that goes on in here is chemistry. There's nothing in here that's not chemistry. So just a heads up on that one. But the chemistry in that tank is anaerobic chemistry. It's the chemistry of bacteria that live in an oxygen-free environment. And part of our goal there is to begin the breakdown of organic matter, begin cleaving off nitrogen compounds from organic matter, so that when they enter the next process, which is a very different kind of an ecosystem, they are prepared for a next stage of chemical transformation. So all of these different tanks we go through are different ecosystems. And one of the things I mentioned is the concept of modularity in ecological design. These are modular systems, meaning that we have many, many ecosystems, which in nature would occur very far apart in physical space. But within this ecologically engineered system, we have condensed them into a small space, made them adjacent, created very different habitats within them. But we're headed to our next habitat right now. I'll flip my camera. Our next habitat is CA1. So that water would have gone into another tank, AN2, and it's basically the same kind of tank. A lot of what we want going on there is settling. So the heavy stuff settles out, and the stuff that goes out of the top of it, here, I'm going to put it down in here for a second. You can probably hear and see there's lots and lots of bubbling going on down in there. It's kind of a cauldron. So this tank is heavily bubbled and aerated, and the objective in this tank, switch my camera again. The objective in this tank is to much more rapidly decompose organic material and to engage a different group of microbes. So in the first tank, we have microbes that are involved in creating ammonia as a nitrogen compound. In here, we have a group of bacteria that are engaged in a process called nitrification. I'm not going to go into the details of the chemistry, but there's this sequence of different chemical reactions that microbes engage in that takes nitrogen from its organic form and ultimately turns it into nitrogen gas, which is released back into the atmosphere. About 80% of what we're breathing, 79% of what we breathe right now is nitrogen gas. Now I'll say this, it takes a lot of fossil fuel energy to take nitrogen gas out of the atmosphere and turn it into fertilizer. We talked about the Haber-Bosch process as this massive transformative event in discovery and event in human history, where we figured out how to use fossil fuels to take atmospheric nitrogen, which is not a fertilizer, and turn it into, they wanted to turn it into munitions, but it turns out to be a really good fertilizer, which we apply to our fields. And that really transformed agriculture because we could put a lot more fertilizer on our crops. This system is using ecology to run that process in reverse, where we're taking valuable nutrients which were fixed with fossil fuel and we're turning them back into nitrogen gas. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to take something that we have expended so much fossil fuel energy and turn it into nitrogen gas? I'm going to ask that as a question and see if someone can answer that. Yeah, the follow up on that, Zach or someone else, what's the problem of releasing that very nutrient-rich water into natural bodies of water? That's right, algae blooms. And that's a huge problem in Lake Erie right now. So this ability to take the nitrogen out of our wastewater and put it into the atmosphere, we also need to take phosphorus out, and I'll say a little bit more about phosphorus later. Those are the two most important plant nutrients. But that ability to take nitrogen out is a way of essentially preventing this water from harming downstream ecosystems. Now, I will say that I think this technology is quite beautiful and spectacular, but in the end, it's kind of an end of the pipeline solution. We're trying to treat water so that it doesn't harm downstream ecosystems, instead of backing ourselves up a little bit and asking the question, how could we use this very nutrient-rich water to fertilize plants and grow more food so that we wouldn't have to be fixing so much fertilizer? So like I say, it's a quite beautiful, spectacular, ecologically engineered end of the pipeline solution to our problems. But let me quickly follow. This is a little bit out of sequence, but it happens to be outside. This tank I'm opening here, but I'm going to show it to you now while I'm outside. You'll see there's not much, oops, I got to switch cameras here. So here's the tank, and let me just walk around so you can see. Here's the side of the living machine, and this is the final tank. So water leaves those aerated closed aerobic tanks and goes into the greenhouse, and then it comes back out here and is stored in this tank. So this is the water storage tank, and probably a little bit hard to see with light levels here, but this water is actually quite clean in here. This is the water that will ultimately be pumped and used in the toilet. So this is water that has been completely cleaned. Okay, let me just show you that. All right, so now going to walk into the living machine, and I will say, so one of our goals in this system is to get rid of organic matter and get rid of nutrients. These closed aerobic tanks outside get rid of about 70 to 80% of the organic matter. They just turn it into CO2, and that organic matter, if it goes into natural bodies of water, will take oxygen out of those natural bodies of water and cause them harm. So it's very important that we get rid of both organic matter and nutrients as we try to process water. And we've done most of that job just out here before we even get into the greenhouse. So the greenhouse is really focused on what is sometimes called tertiary treatment, which is getting rid of nutrients. And it would be quite natural for you to speculate that the role of the plants in this building is to do what? What would you imagine that these plants are doing in here? And then I'll tell you that they're not doing what you think they're doing. But here's all our plants in the building. You can see this giant fig tree, which is totally overgrown. And maybe I'll say a little bit aside. By the way, that fig tree has lots of figs on the top of it. Let me see if I can show you the figs. So if we were in fact eating these figs, which maybe some students are doing, I'm trying to see if you can actually see figs. They're all over. They're little round globules up there. Well, I don't know if you can see them or not, but it's flush with figs. This would be a great example of, multiple functions if we were extracting figs and selling figs, and, selling figs in the winter in Ohio would be a pretty cool thing to do. But what do you guys imagine that the function of the plants is in here?
Maybe absorb the nutrients?
Yes, that is exactly what you should be saying, is that their function is to absorb nutrients. Look at that lovely calla lily there. Very pretty, isn't it? And that's not right. And I set you up for that one. So it's a good answer. But in fact, if you do the calculations, there's way too much nutrients in here to be absorbed by the plants. That beautiful moss there, quite stunning. Their main function here is to provide root mat for microbial colonies. And I'm trying to find a particularly dense, well, you can see lots of roots on these things. But the roots that are underwater in these tanks basically provide homes for microbes, and the moss on top too. They provide homes for microbes, which do most of the heavy lifting within this system here. So let me just tell you a little bit about sequence here. So when water comes out of the CA tanks outside, it gets pumped into this tank. Label is falling off, but it says OA1 here, open aerobic 1, which means it's a bubble tank. It's open on the top. And water will travel from here, OA1, into OA2, which is this tank, and then it'll travel into OA3. And all along the way, various different colonies of microbes living in the roots of those plants are processing that material. And finally, it will go into this tank here, which is called the clarifier. The clarifier contains a little weir on this side, and water overflows from this tank into that weir. It then goes down into the floor of the living machine in this little thing. And the floor of the living machine looks like it's just gravel, but it's actually part of the system. Water travels, think of this as like a swimming pool here that's filled with gravel. Water will travel across this system, and it will land on the other side of this system over here, which is where it's collected. The other side of this system, and this is, the water here is pretty clear. You can kind of see the bottom here. This is clean water that eventually gets stored outside and that pumped from that tank into a pressurized storage tank. This contraption here is a UV filter. So it runs ultraviolet light through that water to kill any pathogenic bacteria before they end up inside the toilets. So the water in the toilets is pretty clean. So like I say, it's a pretty cool system. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of a story about this fig tree because I have some association with this fig tree. When I was a student at Oberlin, there was a greenhouse where there is now most of the science library. And there was a fig tree growing in that greenhouse. And I did something called air layering, which is you put a bunch of slices in the side of the fig and you put some rooting hormone in it, and you pack it with sphagnum moss, and you put a plastic around it and wrap it, and it grows roots into that. And I did that, and I grew a little branch that had roots on it and cut it off, and it traveled around the country with me for 10 years, and then I brought it back to Oberlin and stuck it in the living machine. So that is a little bit of Oberlin history there, that fig tree living in our living machine. That's a total aside, not really relevant to the tour history. I have like 3 minutes left, and darn it, I'm gonna show you an alternate to the living machine. So we're gonna run into another building right now, but ask me questions about the living machine while I go.
So the nitrogen that comes out of the living machine is that N4?
Good question. Okay, so for those of you who want to geek out on chemistry, first thing we do is ammonification, where we try to cut the amino groups off of proteins, and we end up with ammonia. Next thing we do is nitrification, which is an aerobic process where chemoautotrophic bacteria use that ammonia as a food source. That's their energy source, and they make nitrate, NO3, and nitrite, NO2. And then another group of bacteria who are obligate anaerobes living in the marsh at the end of it are denitrifying bacteria. And they take that NO3 and NO2 and convert it into N2, nitrogen gas, which is what you're breathing right now. But it's like super cool. Okay, we are now entering the composting. Oops, hold on. This will be the tail end. Right now we are in the research lab, which is next door to the HLC, and you can see composting toilet inside. So you are now looking at two alternates to living machine technology. That's a composting toilet. I'll flip the lid open, and I'm not sure if this is going to work, but well, you're seeing poop in the bottom of that, but you're also seeing wood chips in the bottom of that. And then you're seeing a waterless urinal here. And I want to point these out because they really are kind of a counterpoint to the living machine technology in the sense that they are designed to not combine. They're designed to prevent your human waste from ever mixing with water so that it can be turned into compost that can be directly applied to farm fields and fruit trees and other things. I'm now, just for the heck of it, in our last minute, taking you into my research lab, and I'll give you a little tour here of my research lab, which actually, this is not a good way to do the tour. This is called an ion chromatograph, which is used for nutrient analysis. It's how we know what's happening to the nitrogen and phosphorus in the system. Really cool technology, green technology. It does not use any harmful chemicals to do nutrient analysis. This is the part of the lab where we analyze the organic matter present in water coming out of the living machine. It's called biological oxygen demand analysis. This is fecal coliform analysis setup. It's used for measuring the microbes in the living machine. This contraption is called a muffle furnace. It's not really related to the living machine. It's for measuring organic matter in soil. So we use that for analyzing carbon sequestration in soils and plants. And then this table over here is for analyzing ammonium, which is one of the important nitrogen reagents. So one of the great things about this lab is this lab was built out of completely recycled material from old labs at Oberlin. So you'll notice the cabinets don't match each other, which is kind of cool. Everything here was salvaged, not the equipment, but the stuff. All right, I think I'm done. So that's the tour. Wish we could have done a little bit longer, but I felt like at least I gave you a taste of the spectacularness of the living machine and the laboratory. All right, guys, I will see you on Thursday. Work hard on setting up your interviews. Contact your community partners who you're going to interview. There's some great folks out there, and I'm super excited about the content you're going to get. All right, I'm going to sign off right now. Stand up. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I have
Walk
a
back to
quick
the other-
question.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to walk
Did
back to
you-
the building.
Did you do the Williams Mystic semester?
Did you say, did I go on the Williams Mystic semester, or do I know of it?
Either.
I
Both.
certainly know of it. It's a very well-respected program. I have not been on the Williams Mystic thing, but I think it's a very powerful. Do you have some relationship with it?
Yeah, my sister and my mom actually did it a while back, but my sister did it, I think last fall.
I think they have a very good program. I am very connected with the Sea Education Association, which runs the study away programs on the tall ships that travel around the world studying marine science.
Wow.
Yeah, and I highly recommend both programs.
Mhm.
Hold on, I'm bailing from my phone right now. There's only, oh no, there's still two of me. Why are there two of me? Why are there two of me? Let me get rid of one of me. One of me is enough, is what I say, Isabel. One of me may be too many.
Yeah.
My goodness, that
I
was
was,
two. Huh.
yeah, you said you were at, you talked about Woods Hole, and I have like a sweatshirt from there that my sister got me, and I went and visited for the,
You know,
like,
if you're looking for a study away experience, I would love
Yeah.
to talk with you. I mean, Mystic is great. I wouldn't, discount that as an experience, but I do think that the Sea Education Association is a particularly powerful experience. There's something about being on a small ship and sort of running that ship in the ocean that just gives you a kind of perspective on both the world and what it means to sort of collaborate in small groups effectively, both of which are critical to human survival. That is unique among programs. So I'm an enormous fan, and like I said, I'd love to chat with you about it sometime if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. One more question and then I'll go. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Sea Education Association is a specific program or an organization?
I lost you a teeny bit there. Just repeat that sentence.
Is it Sea Education Association is a specific program or an organization?
It's a set of programs and an organization. So SEA, and not to be confused, because there's also like Semester at Sea, which is totally unrelated, which has you on big cruise ships and is just not what I'm talking about. SEA, Sea Education Association, they run a whole series of different programs depending on your particular interests. So some of those programs are very focused on natural science. Some of them are more focused on social science. All of them are very interdisciplinary, but they make different assumptions about your background and your interests. And some of them are sort of more focused on the communities they visit along the way. And some of them are more focused on sort of like, ocean science. So there's a whole sequence of different different programs they run. But as I say, it's one of the most powerful learning experiences that I think you can get in a study away experience. And it's affiliated with Oberlin College, so you know the credits transfer easily. And if you majored in environmental studies, it fits with several different pathways. I had actually a conservatory student who was double degree with environmental studies a couple of years ago who was doing a climate change pathway. And they have one of their programs focuses on oceans and climate change. And so she used that as her capstone experience within the environmental studies major.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
letting me know
Isabel,
about this
anytime you
program.
want to, if you want, you know, if you want to chat about stuff, just schedule some office time with me and let's brainstorm on your future, your life, what you want to do with yourself. I'd be really happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay, well,
Cool.
bye.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.